That's like super distracting.
Sorry.
And then we'll follow you. So it would be even more distracting.
Really?
Still make eye contact with yourself.
Try to avoid it. Okay. Well, thanks for joining me for practice. It seemed to go pretty well for most of you. And I thought I would do a short talk today on, what, just very basic questions. Why, what yoga is, what we hope to do with it, how to maybe understanding, make it more maximally beneficial to us, get the most out of it. So I'm pretty sure we will have heard this word yoga, this Sanskrit word yoga. It means to join something. It's related linguistically to the word yoke, like a yoke of oxen to keep two things together in English. The root word yuj is to join and union, things like that. There's a Tibetan translation, it's very, very fascinating to see how these words also get translated into some, especially from Tibetan, because the Tibetans were very, very fanatical students of the Indian yoga tradition. And the way they translate this word yoga is the word Naljor, which is 2 syllables, Naljor. And Jorwa means to join. So it has that component of joining, but they also decided to make it more explicit in what you're joining. Because just to say it's union, that's like, okay, union of what? And there are many wonderful answers to that, but the Tibetan word Nelva means the primordial, blissful, natural state of enlightenment. So the thing that you're joining in yoga, the thing that you're seeking to join, that yoga is intending to connect with, is your natural state. Now, this is a really interesting starting point for us. I should say for myself, it's that there's a starting point, a starting premise in the yoga traditions, whether they be the Buddhist or the Hindu yoga traditions, all of them share this premise that you are actually, or your mind is of some kind of, it's in a perfect state already. That it already is exactly as it's supposed to be. That it's already, and then what has happened as a result of being in the world, being an embodied creature, is a good analogy is like environmental pollution. Because of pollution, the water is not so good to drink, or people get cancer because they live near various environmental toxins. So this natural state is subject to pollution. This is the pollution of afflictive emotions that rise and through which we have antagonistic relationships to the world. Typically, we live in the world in such a way that we feel like if things work out the right way, I get what I need, if I get what I want, all the way from the most basic survival necessity to more higher level personal fulfillment. If I just get what I want, then I'm going to be happy. And if you're really lucky, that actually can work for quite a long while, and it can work very, you can have a really strong experience of fulfillment. But the problem is, of course, that you have absolutely no control over external circumstances. And as a result, you will experience dissatisfaction, frustration, loss. So yoga practice is presented to us as like a way of reconnecting in all these multiple ways to something that is already basically, essentially pure and perfect. Sometimes we call it consciousness, sometimes there are all sorts of different ways of expressing it, all of which kind of fall short because when we talk about mind, I think as modern people, we typically think about deliberate intelligence and my sense of self is very much bound up into it. But what's being presented to us is this idea that all of those, conscious, conceptual ways of being in the world. I am a certain kind of person. I like this and I don't like that. That those are all sort of, again, pollutants. They're not essentially part of who you are. And yet, and one of the ways that you can kind of look at that is that, again, going back to the question of happiness and fulfillment, you can be as lucky as a person can be and have wonderful, material abundance in your life and still be miserable. It's quite clear that happens. It happens. You may have even experienced it yourself. And yet, some people, faced with tremendous external hardships, somehow remain peaceful and happy, or even quite blissful. And that is because it is ultimately the state of mind. Our minds are what determine our experience in the world. So we're trying to kind of connect to this basic, pure, unpolluted state of mind, even to try to clean up the pollution. So how does this connect to, say, yoga practice that we do? Well, the anti-pollution or the cleanup and the environmental action that is necessary has to take place on multiple levels. And one of those levels is the level of the physiological body, because our physical bodies are a manifestation in many cases of our mental states. So one of the things that we do is we just address in order to get into and familiarize ourselves with this basic perfection and purity of consciousness is to stabilize the physical self. We start with the breath and bring balance to the nervous system. We start to have an ability then to really start to spend time with this thing we're calling mind, this perfect, blissful state of awareness. And this is where most of the traditions that I'm aware of, if they involve physical asana yoga, like the kind of we're doing here, they all say the same thing. Your physical yoga asana practice is to prepare you to be able to do meditation. That is, this is not to say that what you're doing here cannot also be meditation. It can be dynamic, moving meditation. But there's a certain sense in which it's supposed to stabilize you in order to support your ability to dive inward, withdrawing your preoccupation with the external and to try to sit with what is true and real about you, which is this mind. So the word in Sanskrit for meditation, or one of the many words that we translate as meditation, the act of meditation is the word bhavana. Bhavana means also, it can mean familiarize or to habituate. So one of the things we're doing, both in the asana yoga practice, but especially in the sitting meditation, is that we're trying to familiarize ourselves with just consciousness itself, not the contents of consciousness, which are just constantly coming into mind, constantly appearing and then disappearing and appearing and disappearing, but the mind itself. And the way one of the methods that's come down to us, I'm going to share with you, and we'll do for a few minutes here, is a technique called vipassana. The word, it comes from the earliest Buddhist tradition. Vipassana means insight. It means to actually see into something. And it's very simple. And it gets translated into like modern culture. It's become like a very common buzzword of mindfulness. And people talk about it like it's like an executive stress ball or something, that it's just gonna like make you a little bit more like chilled out. But it's actually incredibly sophisticated. It's very simple, but very hard. Because what we're doing, what we're going to be challenging ourselves to do, is to familiarize ourselves with watching the mind and how the contents of the mind simply arise, take place, and then they disappear if we don't hold on to them. So it's a little bit like this. You can be outraged and extremely angry and be wounded. And that's a mental state. But it actually takes effort to maintain a particular angry state. That mental state, which has entered into consciousness, it's not permanent. It will leave consciousness. It will naturally disappear from consciousness. Unless we fixate on it, and unless we hold on to it. It would be very difficult. But put it this way, every emotional, mental, conscious event that's ever happened has happened in our minds. There's nowhere else that it can happen. And every single conscious, mental, emotional event that's ever happened has, again, passed along and disappeared from our minds. This is another way of saying that what we're trying to do is live in the world in a way where our reactions to what happened to us, because certainly there is a world and a objectively real set of circumstances, but we live in the world in a way where our reaction to those circumstances is not predetermined by things that feel completely out of our control. Like I am incapable of being content when there's a jackhammer outside, or when you're being a dick, or when or when I'm not getting my way. I'm just incapable. Well, that's a state of mind that I become habituated to. Yoga, in a sense, is not really that different from everyday life. It's just a deliberate way of repatterning yourself so that you are familiar with sensation, you're familiar with states of mind coming and then disappearing. Now, when we do a patterned set of movements, like in yoga practice, it's not completely obvious that that's what's going on, that we're building up a sort of tolerance for having sensation and not attaching to it. And not there. For example, I'm sure some of, especially those who started like are stiffer or like struggling with an Ashtanga practice. Sometimes you experience something that at first feels like it's pain, right? And pain is to be avoided, right? But then you kind of sit with it a little while and you realize it's actually not pain so much as it's an intensity. It's an intense experience. It's an intense sensation. I can see it. I start to familiarize myself with it. The fear starts to dissipate. And then over a period of time, I can sit with it and be in I can be okay with it. So we're actually seeking out states and sensations and looking at them in order to experience and really know that they're impermanent and really know that they're coming and disappearing. So what we're going to try to do in this Vipassana style meditation experience or practice is simply try to sit with our minds while seeing experience appear and disappear, which it does all the time. We just don't think of it that way. We think that I'm walking through the world and just like I have a good feeling or a bad feeling because this external part, or this external circumstance has forced me to feel that way. So in order to start to break the habit of being forced to feel certain things, to force to feel at all, we need to reorient ourselves to this basic, pure field and perfection of consciousness, which as we reconnect to it, the tradition says this is why we feel good when we do yoga, because we start to get little glimpses of this status, this mind, this perfected state. It doesn't require anything. Nothing needs to be added to it. Nothing needs to be removed from it. Even negative emotional states as they come, they don't need to be purged from it. Far from it. You can't purge negative emotional states, but you can watch them as they disappear and familiarize yourself with that. So we're going to try this for a short bit, give about 10 minutes, and find yourself in a comfortable seat. And you can close your eyes and bring your attention initially just to your breathing. So you place your attention right there at your breathing, the full sensation of as it enters coolness, dryness. Don't try to manipulate the breath. Just let it fall into a natural pattern. The process of meditation here is now, as our minds come into a slightly calmer state, we can sit back and watch. You notice right away, even as you commit yourself to watching the breath, that thoughts are constantly appearing, trying to draw your attention. And as that happens, you're going to make an effort. See if you can make an effort to simply turn that attention, whatever part of your mind that really is, doesn't matter. Turn your attention back to the breathing. Sometimes those thoughts are so persistent, they're so demanding, they say, I need your attention immediately. It's just not true because you've already decided to be here for the next 10 minutes. There is nothing else. And knowing that, you're going to simply choose to return your attention place it on the breath. Completely cover your breath with your attention. Try 5 times continuously following the breath through the inhalation and through its exhalation. Also, don't have to even breathe through the nose. Breathe however is comfortable. Chances are you weren't able to follow 5 full breaths without interruption, which is completely fine. Each interruption is just an opportunity for you to notice that you have a choice to return to your object focus. And as you do that, that thought, maybe the emotion that is baked into that thought, the anxiety, the dissatisfaction, anger, that is actually, as long as you are not currently paying attention to it, that is also now reabsorbed into this infinite sea of consciousness. Bring your awareness now to sound. Pay close attention to the sounds you're experiencing. Sound of my voice, sound of the heating and building, sound of noises from outside, the sound of your own pulse. Notice how the sounds that you're experiencing come without any effort from your side. They simply happen. A certain sound occurs, maybe it continues, but it's always changing. spontaneously arising in your field of awareness, disappearing, placed by another sound experience. For another 5 minutes, we're going to remain. You can choose to bring your focus back to the breath, or stay with the rising of sound. Wherever you place your attention, the goal is simply to observe as thoughts, concepts arise. Non-judgmental. Without judgment, simply return to your chosen focus. Every time thoughts arise, any type, notice, and without judgment, return to the breath, to sound. In this expansive, infinite, radiant, pure awareness, We are complete. We are awake. We are exactly where we are and present. We are always here without knowing it, without recognizing it. In this first step of connecting to the essence, the essential, pure nature of this Naljor is simply getting familiar with how thought, experience arises and disappears. And it's not a permanent state. Our wholeness and our completeness is something that includes all other beings. Extends to all others. So we're going to now close and conclude the meditation, and simply just open your eyes and bring yourself back to where we are. So one of the beautiful and it's, I mean, things that I find very wonderful about some of the mindfulness-based practice like this is it's infinitely portable, because it means that at any time, if you, that sound, for example, sound is always a good one, you can start, you can put yourself in a state where you're simply observing that sound is arising. Sound is not doing anything to you, you're responding to it. And as you become more used to your compulsive reactions to what is happening, the more that you get familiar with this natural state, the natural state, which is very elusive. Like I remember very early on, starting yoga practice, I read a book in India, or like a pamphlet. It was from the Shivananda tradition, and this was actually written by Swami Shivananda, and it was a kind of how, I think it even maybe be called "How to Meditate." And it said how to meditate. So step number one: sit down and fix your mind firmly on the absolute. That's step one. And I may have tried that once, and then I was like, I mean, come on, what is it? Isn't that kind of impossible? I mean, what does it even mean? Not to mention, if I could sit down and fix my mind firmly on the absolute, would I not be really needing to meditate? So it seemed to set the bar incredibly high and make it utterly, beyond reach. So I very strongly connected to, asana yoga and what I was being taught through breathing, movement practice, this vinyasa being the key to the Ashtanga practice. Really, vinyasa, I know that's like now come to mean a bunch of shorthand for like a certain style of yoga practice or flow or connection of poses. what vinyasa means is the infusion of breath into a state of total awareness packaged into a posture. So you've got the breathing, the set of the designated breath, the inhale or the exhale, connected to a certain posture, connected to a gaze, and then the internal bandha work. So you are seeking a state of sort of mindful awareness and being totally present at every vinyasa. It's just another method. It's just another sort of attempt to bring yourself into that state of being here and present. It also has connections, vinyasa separately, has certain connections to ritual process, because in ritual worship in India, both the Buddhist and Hindu tradition, vinyasa refers to ritual sequence of invoking certain deities and then inviting them to be present in your own physical body. It's sort of you create a temple in your body. There's a whole technique for that. So that's a little bit what's happening too, is that you're trying to, through vinyasa, you're making each breath very special, and by becoming awake, aware in that, you're sort of rehearsing that. Well, that's the time that I have. Thank you for coming, and I'll see you all soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.